Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the D-Rate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it. Get ready, my friends, for another DTH conversation that could very well change your life. Ever find yourself saying yes when every fiber of your being is screaming no? Struggling to set boundaries, whether in your personal life or at work? Well, you're in the right place because today we're talking all about boundaries, codependency, and how to reclaim your power. Joining me for this DTH episode is my new friend, Barb Nangle. Barb is not just any coach. She's a boundaries coach, a speaker, and an author who has been through the trenches herself. In 2015, at the age of 52, after decades of therapy and self-help, Barb found her true calling in 12-step recovery programs like Al-Anon and adult children of alcoholics. Since then, she has transformed not only her own life, but the lives of countless others through her unique build framework. Today, Barb's going to share her journey from codependency to empowerment, and trust me, you do not want to miss a word. We're talking about reparenting, trauma, the fine line between kindness and being nice, and how understanding our motives can help us to live healthier, happier lives. And of course, we'll explore how setting boundaries can lead to more meaningful conversations, even with people who see the world differently. So grab your headphones, settle in, and get ready for some serious wisdom, my friends. This episode is packed with insights that will help you fill your own cup first so you can truly thrive. Here's Barb Nangle. Here we go. Barb Nangle, thank you for joining me on the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am so glad to see you today.
Thank you so much, Wilk. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, this is fantastic. So one of the things that struck me about your work, Barb, and the things that I saw after hearing from you was that you had this very long journey of codependency, and that led you to this 12-step recovery program, which led you to figuring out the importance of boundaries. And when I think about the work that I do, Barb, in what we call, this depolarization space and interpersonal communications with people of differing mindsets and differing opinions and things like that, I can't help but think about how important it is to have boundaries and how those boundaries can really save us so much pain, so much misery, and so I'm so glad that you decided to join me here today. So Barb, let's start off by talking about, your journey. How did you get to a point where you realized the importance of boundaries? Talk a little bit about your codependency journey, the 12-step recovery, and we'll start from there.
Yeah, okay, great. So in the winter, like the late fall of December 2014, in late 2014,
there we go.
I volunteered to serve on a project serving homeless people. I volunteered to lead this project at my church. And right around that same time, this homeless guy named Dan came as a parishioner to my church, and he and I became very friendly. And I thought, oh, this is like a gift from God that I get to meet a homeless person and as friends, so that when I'm serving homeless people, they're people, not the homeless.
Sure.
And we became very friendly, and a couple months into our friendship, we had a really big snowstorm here in New Haven, Connecticut, and I decided to reach out to him and ask him if he wanted to stay at my place, which I now know is not normal behavior, and he did. And then I invited him another time, and within a few weeks, he was practically living at my house. I felt trapped in my own home, and this guy messed with my head in a way that I had never experienced. So I was in therapy one day talking about him, and I stopped mid-sentence and I went, oh my God, do you think I need to go to Al-Anon? And my therapist said yes. So for those people who don't know what Al-Anon is, they may know what Alcoholics Anonymous is, or AA. Al-Anon is for the loved ones of alcoholics. And you may be wondering, why do the loved ones of alcoholics need a program? And it's because the things we do sort of naturally that we think are going to help our loved one quit drinking, get into rehab, go to AA, get sober, are actually wrong. And it's counterintuitive what you could and should be doing. And I'd heard of Al-Anon, and I went home and I was looking for Al-Anon on the computer, and this word codependent came up, and I was like, what? Now, Wilk, I had been in therapy since about 15. I was 52 at the time this was happening. So that's 37 years, not of continuous therapy, but almost. I got introduced to the self-help genre at age 24. So I've read gajillions of self-help books, and I was very well versed in all things personal development, spiritual support groups, retreats, like you name it. And I never heard this word codependent. And I remember saying to my therapist, listen, I don't feel like I got hit in the head with a baseball with the news that I'm codependent. I feel like I got hit in the head with a planet. Like, wow. What else don't I know about myself? I'm a deeply introspective person who's been trying. And she said, you know, Barb, I think for you, codependence is a unifying concept. It pulls together a bunch of things that you do know about yourself. You just didn't understand they were related. And, you know, Wilk, at first I thought she was saying it to make me feel better. But as I got to understand more and more about codependence, I realized that it was true. I started going to Codependence Anonymous, felt a sense of relief almost immediately, partially because there's this thing that describes me, that captures all these things about me. There's a program of recovery. There's other people like me. There's hope that it can end. And I very quickly remember saying to someone, I think I need to be reparented. But I didn't know that reparenting was an actual thing that people do. And then 6 weeks into going to CODA.
Can you say that again? Reparenting?
Reparenting. And I'll say more about that in a moment.
Okay, yeah. I've not heard that before, but I'm
okay.
Interested. Very nice.
Excellent.
Okay.
So about 6 weeks into my journey of going to CODA, or Codependence Anonymous, I went away to go visit some friends, one of whom had been in AA for many years and just raved about how utterly transformed her life had been in AA. So I said, oh, hey, I've been going to CODA. She was like, oh my God, that's great. Let me see if I can find a CODA meeting around here and we'll go together. And she couldn't. But she found an ACA meeting, which I had heard of as ACOA, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics. Yes. It never occurred to me that I qualified. It also never occurred to me, like, why do Adult Children of Alcoholics need a program? But I said I would go for her. So it turns out the actual name of the program is Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. Now that I qualify for. And I walked in, and one of the things they said at the beginning was, we reparent ourselves. And I was like, what? And then they read the list of the 14 traits of an adult child, which is affectionately called the laundry list. Mm-hmm. Now, my friend tells me that I sobbed through the whole meeting. I don't remember that, but I bought the literature, came home to New Haven, Connecticut, started going to ACA, and very quickly was like, oh my God, this is literally what I've been looking for my entire life. So it's a trauma recovery program where you reparent yourself and you use the 12 steps of recovery. So I didn't know that I had trauma. I now understand what I have is called relational trauma. Some people call it little t trauma. So most people think of trauma as what is often referred to as big T trauma, like blunt trauma. You were in a war, you were in a hurricane, you were in a really bad car accident. Little t trauma, relational trauma, is sort of what I call like the drip, drip, drip of emotional invalidation,
Sure.
gaslighting, neglect, things that happen in relationships. I've also heard people say trauma can result from unmet needs, like emotional needs. And so reparenting is essentially where you give yourself the love that you didn't get when you were a child. I've heard it said we can backfill the love that we didn't get. And so reparenting can be as simple as we start being good and kind to ourselves, because most adult children beat the crap out of themselves in their head, rake themselves over the coals, they hold themselves to these ridiculously high standards, they judge themselves harshly, that sort of thing. So it could be as basic as you're good and kind to yourself, but it can also be as full-blown as you cultivate this whole cast of internal characters, an inner child, an inner teenager, an inner loving parent, an inner critical parent, and then you interact with them. And my first 8 years in ACA, I dabbled in the reparenting aspects of the recovery and had I cannot tell you how dramatically my life has changed. And in the last year and a half, I've really gotten much more into the reparenting aspect and gotten in touch with this whole inner family, and I cannot tell you the depth of healing. But I really, there were so many ways in which recovery helped me. But I think because my core wound is codependence, that learning how to build healthy boundaries was such a game changer. Sure. And also because boundaries permeate every area of our lives. And they especially affect our relationship with ourselves. So in the ACA 12-step program, which I think all 12-step programs have what they call the promises.
Sure.
Like if you continue to do the recovery, these are the promises. And promise number 1 in ACA is we will discover our real identity. Mm-hmm. In other words, you will learn the boundaries of you. Like where do you end and other people begin? Because so many of us, especially people with trauma, don't know where they end and other people begin. Right. So I was a people pleaser, rescuer, fixer, savior, enabler, codependent. So I would say yes to things I didn't really want to do because I was afraid that people would think I was a bad person or they wouldn't like me. Or they would think I was unhelpful or selfish, like God forbid. Right. And I did things for the express purpose of getting people's approval. Now, I didn't know any of this work, even though I was super introspective and was always doing all this personal development. This is one reason why I started my podcast, which is called Fragmented as a Whole: Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery, because I learned volumes of tools, tips, tricks, mindset shifts, etc. In recovery that I never was exposed to in all of those years of all that work. And I feel like when I think about all the work I did before recovery, the decades of therapy, the books, the retreats, the support groups, and all that stuff, I think of it as like it scratched the surface of the iceberg of my life. Recovery melted the iceberg of my life. So this is why it's so important for me to carry the message of recovery out into the world, because not everybody needs 12-step recovery, but you need the wisdom from 12-step recovery. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize. Well, let's just say this. A lot of people don't know what they don't know. And especially people who have suffered that little t trauma for so long within their lives. I think about the idea of codependency and how that goes so hand in hand with the I guess the opposite of that, which is very much a narcissist in many ways. And I've talked to a number of people that have overcome or been, kind of saved themselves from a relationship with a narcissist. But narcissists and codependents are often attracted to each other.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because they feed into each other's
Patterns.
narcissists, feed off of other people's vulnerabilities or codependents' vulnerabilities, and codependents often, for whatever reason, are fall prey to the narcissist because the narcissist does exactly what you're talking about, goes to those things of, I'm going to make you feel bad for not doing what I want you to do, so I'm going to use that to my advantage in this relationship to basically make you a slave to my whims. It's an ugly and it's a toxic thing, but that's the beauty of 12-step recovery or whatever. You mentioned that not everybody needs 12-step recovery, but those who do really do need it. And the idea, I think to the studying I've done on the topic, and I always like that phrase, right? Keep coming back. It works if you work it. And it is so important that people who do need it. I don't like the and I quite often I often speak out against what I call the perpetual victim mentality, Barb, because when I think of codependents, and I've known several of them, in fact, some people would say at times throughout my life I've been or suffered from some of the same things, as many codependents do. But when I think about how important it is for somebody in that codependent mindset to take the reins and say, I now have the power to fix what I have suffered from. That's a lot of what I think about in those promises that you talked about, right? Is once I figure out what is going on with me, and once I start to utilize these tools that I'm learning, I can better manage my relationships with these other people. And that's where I want to get to in this conversation, Barb, is when we are engaging in conversations with people who are trying to take advantage of our better nature, or take advantage of our vulnerabilities, in the sense that certain people just sense, just like dogs can smell fear. Certain people can sense that I can take advantage of this person because of their weakness or their perceived weakness or their own vulnerabilities, because I can see that there's an in here. I can grab a hold of this. So let's talk. Let's dive right in and go straight to the boundaries thing, and how do we recognize in these conversations, in these engagements, in these things that we are doing, whether it be a situation, I don't think most people have been in extreme. I would call it an extreme situation where you took in a homeless person into your home, and then that is something that I think the vast majority of people wouldn't do, but it takes a big heart to do it.
Well, it takes extreme codependence to do it. Yes.
So maybe not in an as extreme case as that, but it doesn't have to be an extreme case like that. We see it in the workplace. We see it in familial relationships. We see it in romantic relationships. We see it in friendships. We see these people. So for those out there who are, and this could be obviously a very, very long conversation. But for those who find themselves, first of all, give me something, Barb, that the average person in these situations can use to identify and really admit that I am in one of these situations and I need to figure out how to move beyond that. First of all, I want that. Yeah. And then give me some action items that people can use, when all of a sudden they do, and they're willing to admit, I am in one of these situations. How can they start? Because it's not an overnight fix. Let's admit it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But how do they start that ball rolling?
Mm-hmm. So I have to say a little bit about what codependence is before I can answer that. And because you mentioned narcissist, I want to say that both the narcissist and the codependent, they're sick, they're ill, they're not bad or good people. They have things happen to them, and they're wounded, terribly wounded people. I think narcissists are so wounded they can't even see their wounds because they have so much stuff on top of them, and that's why they do such egregious things. So a codependent person is someone who is basically focused on that which is outside themselves. Mm-hmm. So what is he doing? What is she doing? What are they doing? What does he need? What does she need? What does the organization need? What does the situation need? And that was me. Never paying attention to what's going on in here. What do I need? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I think, if you are continually thinking about every move you make and how it affects either one person specifically or everybody around you, that is a very big clue that you are probably a codependent person. You're not thinking about yourself and how the things you're doing impacts you. And so I think my mantra with my clients is keep the focus on yourself, keep the focus on yourself, keep the focus on yourself, keep the focus on yourself. And that doesn't mean being selfish. And I will say, it really bothers me how damaging calling, I think especially women, it may be so for men too, but I know for women to call them selfish is like one of the worst things you can say to a woman.
Definitely a trigger.
And taking care of yourself, filling your cup first.
There you go.
So that you're not trying to pour from an empty cup, but that you're pouring from the overflow. That is self-preservation. And it is selfless because then you have more to give. And so we have acculturated, especially women, to believe that putting yourself first is selfish. And so keeping the focus on yourself is not about being selfish. It's about focusing on what you can control. Because one of the reasons that codependents are utterly exhausted and drained is because they're so focused out there. In recovery, we say you're focused on people, places, and things, none of which you can control. Mm-hmm, and yet that's what you're trying to do. Like, I'm trying to get people to like me. Instead of trying to be like a good and kind and likable person, we're focused on what can I do to get them to like me. Now, I will say that when I got into recovery and I started learning about codependence, I thought that the reason that I was like so helpful all the time was because I was nice. I'm a nice person. Well, here's the thing. I was lying and manipulating. I was saying I liked things I didn't. Things were okay that weren't.
Sure.
I was trying to get people to like me. Kind, good, nice people don't lie and manipulate. So I really think about kindness now. I'd much rather be kind because nice, you can appear nice, you can act nice, but it doesn't mean that you're a good and kind person.
That's right.
And also, I didn't know any of this stuff. And I will say that when I started learning about the recovery and everything, I said to this woman in CODA, I'm starting to see that there's this continuum of helpfulness. On one end, we've got kindly, helpful, healthy, functional behavior. And on the other hand, we've got this dysfunctional, unhealthy, enabling, rescuing, codependent behavior. And it's now pretty clear to me what the difference is between those two ends of the continuum. It's in the middle that I'm confused. Where do you flip over from being helpful to being rescuing? And the woman said, well, Barb, it really depends on your motives. Why are you helping them? Are you helping them because you want them to like you or because you want to be helpful? And I was like, I'm totally doing it to be helpful. But I'll tell you something, Wilk, that question kind of percolated in my brain and I was like, oh my goodness, I really am doing it for their approval. Not so they will like me, but so they will think that I'm nice, so that I think that I'm helpful, so they will not think I'm a bad person. So they will not think that I'm unhelpful. And so that question, until I could see what my motives were, the question of motives was not helpful. But once I saw it, I realized this is an excellent question for me to decide what is the healthy behavior for me and what's the right boundary for me. What are my motives? And then my second question is, does this serve me? And what I mean by that, does it serve my highest good? So one of the things we say in recovery is we're practicing these principles in all our affairs. We mean we're practicing the spiritual principles of 12-step recovery. In other words, we're trying to be as good and decent of a person as we possibly can, because we're much less likely to relapse if we do that. And also, it's the right thing to do. So does this serve me means, does it serve my highest good? Does it bring me in alignment with my values? Does it bring me in alignment with whatever I consider to be my higher power? Does it serve my highest good? And what are my motives? And so if your motives are pure, like I truly want to be helpful, then go ahead and you have the time and energy and effort and interest in doing it. Go ahead and do it. But if your motives are, I want to impress them, that's questionable. And you need to think again. It doesn't mean you don't do it, but you want to start observing your behavior so that you can get your behavior in alignment with your values.
Well, there has to be balance.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It has to be balance. Yeah. I mean, in all things, balance is important. I mean, obviously being helpful, I think in a lot of ways being helpful and being kind are on the same wavelength somewhere.
Agreed. Absolutely.
But there has to be that balance in that if I'm doing this just for them, but it's something that I truly don't want to do. I want to go back to what you said about filling your cup first. I heard another person say at one point in an interview that I was doing that there is a reason that on an airplane we are told to put our mask on first and then help the person next to us. Because if all of a sudden we pass out because we can't breathe, we're no longer of any use to anybody. And in fact, we are just dead weight, and we are now an obstacle for the rest of the people that we might have been able to help along the way.
Exactly.
So I think it is so important that whole concept of filling our own cup first. And that is not selfish. That is just providing nourishment to our own soul so that we can better help other people around us. And that's the true kindness, right? That, when I think of kindness, and I talk a lot about kindness and people's default position of being kind, but we also have to be kind to ourselves because we are of no use to anybody else.
Right.
If everything that we are doing to try and please other people makes us miserable, we are of no real use to anybody else.
Yes. Include yourself in the circle of kindness.
Exactly. We have to.
Absolutely.
We have to be kind to ourselves. I had a conversation way early on in my podcasting journey. I talked to a gentleman, one of the guys, he talks about self-love, and he's one of the leading mouthpieces in the self-love movement, as far as I understand. Jonathan Trowan, very cool guy. Spoke with him a few years ago, and here's one thing that I love about this concept that you're talking about, Barb, with the fill your own cup first and do things. How does this serve me? What are my motives? What are the things that I'm doing, right? Because if we go into any interaction, and this I want to take this full circle to talk, because like I said, this could go on forever, but we only have so much time in this conversation. So I want to take this to the level of what I talk so much about is our interpersonal conversations and relationships with people of differing mindsets, and how we can use these kind of tools, how we use these boundaries principles to have meaningful conversations with people that we may not agree with. because I think that's one of the big things that people lack today is the ability to have meaningful conversations with people that think about things differently than they do things differently than they do, maybe have different cultural backgrounds than they do. These things that are used as separators by the forces that be whatever. But how do we use these kind of boundary skills to have meaningful conversations with people of unlike minds?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you have to get well-established boundaries before you're ever going to have the wherewithal to disagree with someone. Because people with poor boundaries are just going to say yes to stuff that they may think is horrendous. Mm-hmm. Because they're so afraid of conflict. And what I learned through the boundary building process was how to communicate much more clearly, and not much more, clearly and directly. I was doing murky communication. Mm-hmm. And because boundaries are clear, not murky, your communication about them must be clear and not murky. And I realized all of the things that I was doing that contributed to conflict. So this goes back to keeping the focus on myself. So I talked about filling my cup first. That's only one of the ways that I teach people to keep the focus on themselves, which is take really good care of yourself. I'm not walking around in the world depleted. I go out into the world with an overflowing cup, so I'm not looking to get my needs met in some sideways kind of way because I need your approval or I'm exhausted or I need you to take care of me. And so another way is to ask yourself, what do I want or need in this situation? I never asked that. And to mind my own business, I was constantly giving unsolicited advice to people and saying, you should try this and you should do that. And I did it especially in the relationship department, even though I never had a healthy relationship until I got in recovery. And I'm now in a very wonderful, happy, romantic relationship. We've been together for 5.5 years, and neither one of us knew that this was possible. He was married for 10 years and then for 25, whereas I was in a lot of relationships, but some of them up to 10 years, but nothing like that. And we both know the difference between what we have and don't have. And another one is in recovery, we call it what's my part, or what I would say to people outside of recovery is if you have a recurring situation, and especially if you have a dynamic that occurs over and over again in your life in multiple relationships, take a look at what might you be doing to contribute to the situation. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Instead of just assuming, one phrase I hear from my clients all the time is people take advantage of me. People don't take advantage of you. You give them advantage by continually doing what they want you to do without saying anything, without saying no. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so learning, you have to have some of this stuff before you can even enter the conversation and disagree with someone. And so I'll give you some examples of things that people do or things that people say that are much more likely to create conflict, not even having to do with these bipolar kind of dynamics that you're talking about in society. So let's say that you are riding in the car with someone and you don't like the way they're driving. So maybe you might say, you're driving like a maniac. Okay, that is so much more likely to result in conflict than the way I'm going to say in a minute. Number one, you said you're talking about them, so they're much more likely to get defensive. And then the fact that you've thrown around the word maniac, they're even more likely. Absolutely. So what's going to happen is you're going to have conflict. And you're going to blame them, by the way. You're going to blame them for the conflict, even though you launched the first, whatever you call it, or Sally or whatever that expression is. Yeah. So the conflict is now going to be about whether I'm driving like a maniac or not. But the proper way to keep the focus on yourself in a conversation like that is to say, I don't feel safe. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about yourself and you're saying, I don't feel safe. It's very hard for someone else to dispute whether or not you do or do not feel safe. But we're talking about, that's the actual issue. The issue at hand is not their style of driving. The actual issue is your lack of feeling safe.
Me feel using you statements rather than I statements. It's very important.
Right. And so Right. And I'd heard I statements before. I just didn't, and I knew that they were important, but I didn't understand like how important they are. Another thing is that when we are proactive about the way that we're living, which is the opposite of the victim, by the way, and that is by far coming out of victim mentality, hands down, the biggest paradigm shift of my recovery. And I do not look like the quintessential victim. I could spot those folks a mile away because I was going to rescue those people, but I was astonished to learn that I had that. But when we are proactive, which is how I think of people who have healthy boundaries as living on purpose, being proactive. When people are proactive, they are way more focused on what they want and not what they don't want. So let's say you're going out to dinner with somebody that you've been out to dinner with many times, and they say, hey, let's go have Thai food. Well, you could say, you know I hate Thai food. So again, we've started with you.
Statements, yeah.
So defensive. And then when you throw the word Thai, and then there's the whole tone of voice, conflict. And then the conversation is going to be about what they do or do not know about you and whether they should keep track of it. Instead, you could say, I prefer Caribbean cuisine. So you may not get to have Caribbean cuisine, but at least an actual conversation is going to go from there, right? So if you can't even do things like that, then you're not going to be able to disagree with someone who has an opinion that is very different from yours on an issue that you feel very deeply about.
Yes.
You're probably going to cave. You're not going to go around them. You're going to just, and you're going to blame them, which is the victim mentality.
Yeah, no, that's
because you don't see your part.
That is absolutely right. No, so much of that, and I think you're right. I think it does go back a lot to, that codependency falls line or falls so much in line with that fear of conflict, but then the defensiveness that comes, it's there are so many of these things that ultimately end up making the situation worse when it could have been a very proactive and productive conversation. It becomes a small battle, and then people fall right back into that victim bucket. So Barb, I have to tell you that there's a lot of people out there that suffer from codependency, and they battle the battles they do because they are afraid of conflict, because they don't know they don't know how to actively mitigate those conflicts productively and proactively. But like I say so often on this show, Barb, is we can't control everything that happens to us, and this falls so in line with what you do, and we cannot control the world, everything that happens in the world around us. We cannot control that everything that happens to us, but we have an absolute responsibility to control the way we react to it. And using tools, whether it's in CODA or ACOA or Al-Anon or Alcoholics Anonymous, or any other of several 12-step programs, there are a lot of tools out there that people can use to deal with their little T trauma, to deal with what they have battled their whole life that maybe they didn't know. So many people don't know what they don't know. So give me just round out we're at the end of our time here, Barb. I so appreciate this conversation. Tell people where they can find out more about you, and then we'll wrap up for the day.
Sure. So if they're already listening to a podcast on a podcast app, they can hop on over to Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery, or you could just go to fragmentedtowhole.com. And my favorite place to hang out on social media is Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching, and you can find links to everything about me in there. I do, I mainly work, my groups are always women. I will privately coach a man, but the group things that I do are for women, and I offer a 12-week private coaching program for women. I'm especially focused on professional women who say yes when they really want to say no, and who are neglect themselves because they're so focused on other people. And my goal is to get them to live with balanced relationships and to give generously in a way that's sustainable for them. Because I will say, even though I was a volunteeraholic before I got into recovery, I give more service now in terms of hours per week, now that I have healthy boundaries, than I did before, because I do it from a full overflowing cup.
That's right.
I do it strategically, and I do it by choice, not by obligation.
That is so important. Do it by choice, not out of obligation. And you can only help other people if your own cup is overflowing. Beautiful way to end it. Barb Nangle, thank you so much for joining me on the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I do appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate you. This is great. I love what you're doing. Keep it up. We need more Wilks out there.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the D-Rate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.